I worked a double shift the night my body finally gave out. I remember standing at my desk, staring at a spreadsheet that had started to blur at the edges, thinking I just needed another coffee. Then I remember nothing. The next thing I knew, I was lying in a hospital bed with tubes in my arm, and a nurse I had never seen before, telling me I had collapsed in the parking garage and that a coworker had called 911. My head was pounding. The lights were too bright. And when I looked around the room, there was no one there. No familiar face. No hand holding mine. Just the steady beep of a monitor and a plastic cup of water on the nightstand. I asked the nurse if anyone had called my family. She smiled in that careful way nurses do when they are trying not to say something difficult. She told me the hospital had reached my emergency contact. My mother. I closed my eyes and told myself she was probably on her way. My name is Claire. I am 31 years old. I am an accountant at a mid-size logistics firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have worked there for 6 years. And in those 6 years, I have taken exactly 4 days off, 2 for a funeral, 1 for a root canal, and 1 because there was a ice storm and the office was physically closed. I am the kind of person who answers emails at 10 o'clock at night. I am the kind of person who says yes when she means no, who covers for other people because she cannot stand the idea of letting someone down. I have been that person for as long as I can remember. And I think I became that person because it was the only way I knew how to earn my place in my own family. I grew up in a house where love was not given equally. My brother, Denny, is 3 years younger than me and was, from the time he was born, the son that our mother and stepfather orbited around. Danny was talented, or at least that was what they always said. He played guitar. He painted. He had big ideas about moving to Nashville and making something of himself. What he did not have was any interest in following through, any willingness to work, or any ability to pay his own bills. But that was fine, because I was there. I was always there. When Danny needed new equipment for his music, my mother called me. When my stepfather's truck needed a new transmission, my mother called me. When they wanted to take a vacation to Myrtle Beach 2 summers ago, my mother asked if I could help with the rental cost, just this once, which was the same thing she had said the summer before that. I said yes. I always said yes. And every time I hung up the phone after transferring money I did not really have to spare. I told myself this was what family did. This was love. This was connection. What I did not let myself think about too long was the feeling I got every time I called them and the phone went to voicemail. Or the Christmas. I drove 4 hours to their house with a car full of gifts and a lasagna I had spent all day making. And Danny showed up 2 hours late, glanced at his presents, and spent the rest of the evening on his phone while my stepfather watched football and my mother kept saying how proud she was of Danny for really coming into his own. I did not ask what that meant. I had stopped asking things like that. I had been in the hospital for almost a full day before my mother texted me back. Not called. Texted. The message said, "Honey, we are actually already at the airport. Danny got a chance to do a showcase in Austin, and we bought tickets months ago. You know how hard he has worked for this? The doctors will take care of you. That's what they're there for. Keep us posted. Love you." I read that text 4 times. I kept waiting for it to say something different. I had a heart arrhythmia. That was what they found. My heart had been beating irregularly, probably for months. And the combination of chronic sleep deprivation, poor nutrition, and stress had finally pushed my body past the point it could compensate. I was not in immediate danger by the time I was admitted, but the cardiologist wanted to monitor me for at least a week, run more tests, adjust my medication, make sure I was stable. I was in a hospital bed, alone, with a heart condition, and my mother was at the airport. I did not respond to her text that day. I did not know what to say. I stared at the ceiling for a long time and tried to figure out why I was surprised. The first night was the hardest. The hospital was quiet after visiting hours, and the loneliness was a specific kind of weight I had not expected. I had always been independent. I had always been fine on my own. But there is a difference between choosing to be alone and lying in a hospital room at 2 a.m, listening to someone cry 2 doors down, and wondering if anyone in the world is thinking about you. The second morning, a nurse named Patricia came in to check my vitals, and she asked if I had any family coming to visit. I told her my family was out of town. She nodded and wrote something on her clipboard, and I thought that was the end of it. But when she came back that afternoon, she had a small plant in a paper cup, one of those little succulents they sell in the gift shop downstairs, and she set it on my windowsill without making a big deal of it. Just said, "Rooms feel better with something alive in them." I did not cry in front of her. I waited until she left. On the third evening, I had a visitor. The nurse's aide came to tell me someone was asking for me at the front desk. She said his name. I did not recognize it at first. Then something shifted in the back of my mind. An old photograph. A name my mother had once almost said, and then swallowed. A question I had asked when I was about 9 years old, and been told to drop. His name was Robert Calloway. He was tall, maybe 60, with gray at his temples and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He stood in the doorway of my room, holding a paper bag from the deli down the street and looking at me like he was afraid I might tell him to leave. I probably should have. I did not know this man. But something about the way he stood there, cautious, like he had practiced what he was going to say and forgotten it all the moment he arrived, made me say, "Come in." He sat in the chair beside my bed, and he told me he had seen my name in a news brief. Apparently, my collapse in the parking garage had been reported in a small local blog, the kind that covers neighborhood incidents. He had set up a Google alert years ago. He said this, with some embarrassment with my name in it. He had been doing it for a long time. I asked him why. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he was a friend of my father's, my biological father, the man my mother had never discussed, whose name had been removed from every conversation in our house, like a word that had been deliberately cut out of a book. I had asked about him twice when I was a child, and both times, my mother had looked at me with an expression I could not read, and said it was complicated, and that some things were better left alone. Robert told me that my biological father, a man named James Calloway, his older brother had died 4 years ago. He told me that James had known about me, that he had wanted to be in my life, that my mother had made it very clear, in terms that left no room for negotiation, that he was not welcome anywhere near us, and that if he tried to make contact, she would make things very difficult for him legally. He had hired a lawyer. He had written letters. He had, eventually, accepted that there was a wall he was not going to be able to get through, and that the best he could do was stay close enough to know I was okay. So Robert had stayed close instead. From a distance, he had followed what he could find about me. When his brother died, he said, he had promised himself that if I ever needed something, he would try to be there. He said he was sorry it had taken a crisis for him to show up. He said he understood if I wanted him to leave and never come back. I did not want him to leave. He stayed for 2 hours that first evening. We did not talk about anything heavy. After that, he asked about my job. I asked about his. He told me he was a retired contractor who now mostly helped build houses with a volunteer organization on weekends. He made me eat half the sandwich he had brought because I had barely touched my dinner tray. When visiting hours ended, he stood up and said he would come back tomorrow if that was all right. I said it was all right. He came back every single evening for the next 9 days. He brought different things each time. One night it was a crossword puzzle book because I had mentioned offhand that I used to do them on Sunday mornings. One night it was a decent cup of coffee from the place 3 blocks away because I had complained about the hospital coffee, which tasted like it had been brewed in a parking lot. One night, he brought nothing at all. just himself. And we sat and watched a nature documentary on the small TV in the corner, and did not feel like we needed to fill the silence. He met Patricia the nurse, who approved of him immediately and told me I had good people in my life, which made me feel two contradictory things at once. My mother texted 4 more times while I was in the hospital. Each message was some version of checking in, which mostly meant asking whether the doctors had given me a timeline for discharge because she wanted to know when things would be back to normal. She did not ask what the doctors had actually found. She did not ask how I was sleeping, or whether I was eating, or whether I was scared. On day 6, she mentioned that Danny's showcase had gone really well and that he had met some people who might be interested in his music. She said it like she expected me to be happy for him. I did not respond to that one. On day 8, a financial coordinator came to talk to me about my insurance coverage and the portion of the bill that would fall to me out of pocket. The number was not catastrophic, but it was not nothing either. I was sitting with that information, trying to do the mental math of what I would need to cut back on for the next few months. When my phone rang, it was my mother. I answered because I thought something might be wrong. Nothing was wrong. She was calling to let me know that she and my stepfather and Danny were flying back 2 days early because Danny wanted to get back to Charlotte to meet with someone about a potential recording connection. She said, almost as an afterthought, that she supposed she would stop by the hospital when she landed. She asked if I needed anything. I said I was fine. She said great, and that she would see me soon, and that she was glad things weren't more serious. She arrived the following afternoon with my stepfather and without Danny, who apparently had gone straight from the airport to meet his contact. She came into my room and hugged me and said I looked pale and that I needed to eat more. And then she sat down and looked around the room with the expression of someone doing a silent inventory. She noticed the plant on the windowsill. She noticed the crossword book. She noticed the coffee cup from the place 3 blocks away. She asked where all of it had come from. I told her I'd had a visitor while she was gone. Something moved across her face. Very quick. Who, she said. I told her his name. The color left her face in a way I had never seen before. She sat very still for a moment, and then she said, with a voice that was working hard to stay even, that she would like to speak to someone at the nurse's station about visitor protocols for the room. What happened next, I only heard about secondhand. From Patricia, who told me later, with the particular satisfaction of someone who had witnessed something they felt was deserved, my mother went to the front desk and asked, in the way she had of making requests sound like instructions, to see the visitor log for my room. She said she was my emergency contact and next of kin, and she had concerns about who had been granted access during my stay. The woman at the desk, Patricia, told me her name was Sandra, and that Sandra had been working that desk for 11 years and had seen everything, looked at my mother calmly, and pulled up the log and turned the screen so my mother could read it. Robert Calloway. Every evening. 9 visits. Signed in. Signed out. Every single night, while my room was empty of everyone else. My mother stood at that desk for a long moment without saying anything. Then she came back to my room. She did not sit down. She stood near the door and she looked at me, and I could see she was trying to find the right opening. The right angle. The right way to control what was happening. I had watched her do this my entire life, locate the frame and step into it, and make everything fit around her. But I had been lying in a hospital bed for 10 days with a lot of time to think. And I had spent some of that time thinking about frames and who builds them, and who gets to decide what fits inside them. I spoke first. I told her I knew about my father. I told her I knew about the letters. I told her that a man who owed me nothing had shown up every single night, while the people who were supposed to love me most were watching my brother play guitar in another state. I told her I wasn't angry. That was the truest thing I said. And it surprised me as I said it. I wasn't angry. I was just done. She started to say something about how complicated things had been. How I didn't understand the full picture. How James had not been a good person in ways I wasn't aware of. I told her that maybe that was true, and maybe it wasn't. But it was also a conversation we should have had when I was 9 years old, and asking questions she refused to answer. I told her that I had spent most of my adult life trying to be enough for a family that had already decided how much I was worth to them. I told her I was going to stop trying so hard. She left without saying much else. My stepfather sent me a text that evening that said I was being dramatic and that my mother had only been trying to protect me. I did not respond. Danny did not reach out at all. I was discharged 2 days later. Robert came to pick me up. We did not make a big deal of it. He pulled up in a sensible gray sedan, helped me with my bag, asked if I was hungry. We went to a diner nearby and ate eggs, and he told me more about his brother. The things James had been like, the parts of him that might have mattered to me if circumstances had been different. I listened and asked questions and ate my eggs and thought about how strange it was that grief could arrive years late for someone you never got to know. I did not cut my mother off completely. I want to be honest about that. We have spoken a handful of times since then, and each conversation is shorter than the one before. And I think we both understand that the shape of things has changed. I stopped sending money. The first month was hard. She called twice, and my stepfather called once, and there was a long text from Danny about how I was being selfish, but then it got easier. The way hard things often do when you stop fighting the feeling and let it settle. Robert and I have dinner once a month now. Sometimes more. He showed me photographs of his brother from when James was young. There is one where James is laughing at something off camera. And when I look at it, I notice that his eyes are the same shape as mine. I keep a copy of that photograph in my nightstand drawer. I do not know exactly what that means yet. I think I am still figuring it out. I have started saying no more often. To things at work. To favors I don't have the energy for. To the old habit of making myself smaller so other people can take up more space. It does not always feel natural. Some days it feels like learning to walk in shoes that actually fit after years of wearing ones that were too tight. Strange. At first. And then, like something you cannot imagine giving up, the plant from Patricia is still alive on my kitchen windowsill. I did not expect it to last this long. Honestly, I have never been great at keeping things alive. But I water it on Sundays, and it keeps putting out new growth. Slow and stubborn, like it has somewhere to be. I think about that sometimes. How something can survive in a room where it was never really supposed to be. Just because someone decided it deserved a little light.